Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I just want to be upfront, super quick. I haven't made videos in a while, not because I haven't wanted to, but I transitioned from an at-home job to an outdoor job. I've just been transitioning through that and have had no energy to put into my YouTube channel. So I consider YouTube as a hobby that I like to do for fun anyway. So I'm not going to force myself to make videos when I don't want to, but I also don't want to look back and regret that I didn't try to keep making videos. So this is kind of just a placeholder to kind of hold myself accountable to make a video, because it's just something I want to do. So sorry if you think my 2022 reading list is boring. I completely understand. This video is mostly just to keep myself on track. But how are you? Let's talk, girl. Let's catch up. Let's update each other. I have gotten into reading because I have to take a lot of time to rest now from the kind of work that I do, and that includes Animal Crossing and reading. So I'm just going to go through some of the books that I have read this year, and just talk to you about them. So first up is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland, and just look at this cover. It's very gorgeous. It gives you a good idea of the kind of aesthetic that's in the book. To be honest, when I first started reading it, kind of felt like I was just reading the author's Pinterest board. It gets right in your face about what kind of aesthetic you're walking into. It's kind of like beautiful decaying stuff, if that makes sense. I'll explain in a second. But the synopsis is about a girl who, when she was young, her and her two sisters went missing and then were found again. And when they were found again, their dad was convinced that it wasn't them, and then ended up committing unalive. And slowly but surely she starts to unravel the mystery behind her and her sister's disappearance as kids. I will say, you have to kind of get through the first few chapters of the main character kind of just gushing over her older sister. Her older sister is a model and she's beautiful, she designs fashion, and the main character really looks up to her. And you don't really get to know the main character too much because of that, and I kind of was rolling my eyes throughout the beginning, but slowly the main character did grow on me, and the more that the mystery amped up, the more I was like, oh wow, this is actually really interesting. If you're into modern fantasy, supernatural, young adult kind of genre, I definitely recommend this. Easy read, very interesting, all of your questions get answered. Just get through those first 3 chapters, and I'm telling you, it'll be worth it. Okay, please don't kill me. I know there are a lot of cult fans out here for this book, but I also read American Gods by Neil Gaiman, and I did not like it. I have a mostly hate relationship with Neil Gaiman. My library where I live is extremely limited and extremely small, and for some reason they have a bunch of Neil Gaiman. So I was like, well, at least I have this guy to check out and read. I just don't like his writing style. He's just not for me. American Gods sets up this really cool premise in the beginning, and I'm like, oh man, this is really exciting. It's about a ex-convict who gets out of jail and finds out his wife was cheating on him, and she also ends up dying, and so this older man scoops him up and is like, if you will work as my bodyguard, I will make sure all of your expenses and living wages are covered. He soon finds out that this old man is actually Odin from the Norse mythology, and Odin starts to tell him the gods of all these mythos from all different cultures are real, and the way that they exist is through people believing that we exist. But they are starting a war with the new gods, which are the gods of technology, television, media, etc. And so I thought the book was going to be about Odin rounding up all of the gods from these different cultures, because that's what he says his plan is going to be. but really you just spend more of your time with the main character going around to different rural places in America, and for some people they really like that, and they really like these short stories that happen in between about some lesser known mythical creatures and gods from different cultures, and just like how they're living their modern lives in America now that they've moved from their place of origin to here. I was just looking for more of that, like, plot driven, like, I don't know, more of like, it's hard to explain what my expectations were going to be. I just thought it was going to be more of like, how do we round up these gods, and then the climax is going to be like, what is the war? How do they resolve this conflict of the new gods versus the old gods? And that's not what it was at all. I went on r/books and ranted, and it seemed that half the people agreed with me, and the other half of people were like, oh, I really loved the short stories and the getting to meander around America, and it's just like, it wasn't for me. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, go ahead, check it out. For me, very disappointing. After this, I read Room by Emma Donoghue. And if you remember back in like 2015, there was a movie about this book, and I had heard of the movie, didn't even know it was a book, came across it in my library, and was like, okay, let's check this out. So, just in case you haven't heard the synopsis of the movie, I'll tell you the synopsis of the book. It's about a woman and her son who are living in this shed, basically, because back when the woman was a teenager, she was kidnapped by a man, and she's been missing ever since. Well, he ends up taking advantage of her often, and she ends up bearing a child who is her son, and it's about her raising her son in these conditions. And slowly, they start to make an escape plan, and the book is about how this all happens. Spoilers right here. They do end up escaping, and it's kind of about like how they start adjusting from living in this small room to the outside world, and it all is taken from the point of view of the child. And so we get to see kind of this culture shock that he receives from leaving the room to now being out in the world. I've seen some people talk about how they don't like that the point of view is from the child because it's kind of limited and he kind of has a skewed point of view, but personally, I thought the author did a good job of balancing what was actually going on in reality, and we have this interesting point of view that none of us, I mean, I'll speak for myself, I didn't grow up in a room, just one singular room, and we get this unique perspective of how he views the outside world, and even through his grammar, like how he's been affected by living in this room with one person and a TV. There's a lot of suspense, there's a lot of heartfelt moments. If you read this book and then watch the movie, you will be pleasantly surprised because the movie does a very faithful version of the book. Next we have Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. I enjoyed this book so much. If you've read Gone Girl, this is the same author who did that. Basic synopsis: it's about a woman who, when she was a child, her brother murdered her family, and as she's grown up, she's now in her 30s, and she's starting to lose money from all the publicity and everything, and she needs to start finding a job. But she can't hold down a job because she has terrible PTSD. One day, there's this club called the Kill Club that invites her. They're like a true crime club. They invite her to come to this meeting, and they're like, your brother's innocent. He's not guilty. And she's like, okay, you know what? You want me to investigate this? Pay me money, and I'll go talk to people from my past about it for you. And she starts to unravel, like, oh, wait, maybe this isn't what I thought it was all my life. Spoilers start now. I will say, if you cannot stomach some fucked up shit, I don't recommend this book. There are some scenes in here that I will never forget just because of how gruesome they are. But the overall ride is mind-blowingly amazing. I could not put it down. Each chapter takes the point of view of either the main character, her brother back when the crime happened, and her mom before she was murdered. And piecing all of their point of views together, you kind of get an idea of what happened. I will say my biggest complaint about this book is the ending. Not very satisfying, kind of random, but overall does not taint the experience, I think, that is exciting and fun and suspenseful going through the book. It's so fucked up, but it is so good. Next, I read Girl, Serpent, Thorn by, I'm sorry, I might mess up this last name, but Melissa Bashardust? Sorry. I don't typically like fantasy genres unless it's like modern fantasy. I'm just not really into the aesthetic or the stories or what have you, but this takes place in ancient Persia, so the change in scenery was enough for me to be like, okay, I can do this. It's about an ancient Persian princess who was poisoned when she was a baby, that if anybody touches her, they are instantly poisoned. And she lives her life locked up in a tower, but one day they end up capturing a demon who is the same kind of demon that casted this curse on her. And she is now convinced that she has to go talk to this demon in the dungeon and figure out any answer she can about what happened to her, and starts realizing that she's been lied to her whole life about the origins of her curse. This one is definitely aimed towards teenagers, but didn't stop me from enjoying it. Sometimes I don't mind plot holes if it's like a good story overall, believable enough for me to be like, well, story's got a story. It's got sapphic love interest, it's got male love interest. If you're into a seductive, charming bad guy, you're gonna like this one. People have been hailing it as like the feminist fairy tale that we've needed, and I didn't really see it through that lens as I was reading it. It was just like, yeah, these characters are female. I don't know. They're strong. It's not like, it didn't feel forced. It didn't, the feminine presence didn't feel forced. It felt nice. We have intergenerational kind of like troubles that are being sifted throughout the story, so that by the end, all of the heroes that come out on top are women. So if you're looking for kind of a feminist, sapphic fairy tale with different twists, I recommend it. I really enjoyed it. Easy read, fun time. Next we have Lost Causes of Bleak Creek by Rhett McLaughlin and Link Neal. Yes, Rhett and Link from Good Mythical Morning. I am huge fans of them. I watch Good Mythical Morning. I listen to their podcast. I've been to one of their live shows. I suddenly remembered one day, oh yeah, they released a book back in 2019 that I never read. So let's check it out. And I'm really glad that I did. I'll just read the synopsis that I wrote down in my review on my Discord server. Bleak Creek seems like a quiet, quaint southern town, and when Rex and Leaf's friend are sent to a correctional school, they start to unravel the disturbing secrets lurking within, and the truth behind the reoccurring deaths that have been happening at the school within the last decade. My first impressions when I opened up this book, the self-insert characters were a little bit cringe to me, but I know that Rhett and Link need to cater their content to their audience that comes to their stuff for them. It ended up becoming easier and easier to read, and not only that, but they're really not the main characters. It's like an ensemble cast, so even if you do find it a little bit distracting, there ends up being other characters anyway that are just as, if not more important to the plot. I have not laughed out loud at a book in so long. Oh my goodness. Their humor translates onto paper so well. I feel like I know their voices well enough that I was able to pick out, oh, Rhett's writing the humor and Link is probably more in charge of the melodrama. But overall, if you're not fans of them, it really does read all as one voice, so it's not distractingly two voices, if that's something you're worried about. This was released right before they did their deconstruction podcasts, where they talked about their journey through Christianity and how they've been deconstructing it, and I feel like you can definitely feel the beginning echoes of that in this book. They just have very honest observations of living in a small town that's super religious. I don't know, I wish they would write more books. I was really into it. I they're not like the greatest writers in the world, but it was enough for me to be like, okay, yeah, they're pretty good at this. I definitely would love to see a movie of it for sure. It's got a little bit of fucked upness in it, so once again, if you're not really into that kind of thing, I don't recommend it. But it's not enough for me to be like, oh, I don't know, like the big content warning I had for Dark Places. I think they catered it towards their like preteen audience. And last but not least, we have finally caught up to the last book I have recently read, Me, Myself, and Bob by Phil Vischer. I grew up as a huge VeggieTales fan. We owned like every movie up until maybe I was in middle school. VeggieTales holds a very special place in my heart. It is one of the only things untouched by my religious trauma, next to Audrey Assad's religious music. Going into this, I was very excited. I still see Phil Vischer in a very fond light. I found it to be a very interesting read. I don't know if that's only because I'm a VeggieTales fan. I don't necessarily know what interest someone would have if they weren't a VeggieTales fan. But overall, it was a super interesting read. Getting to see the behind the scenes of what went into a show that I enjoyed, I didn't realize was like groundbreaking at the time as I was watching it. Phil Vischer, like even just outside of the religious aspect, broke some amazing historical ground in 3D storytelling animation and was doing it in his own basement around the same time that Pixar was releasing Toy Story, and he was releasing these videos straight to video through stores and somehow managed. It's crazy. His downfall was definitely, he had taken no business classes. And that ended up, I think, being his ultimate downfall. I will say, I took a deep dive into Phil Vischer's social media so I could see who he became on this crazy timeline that we are on now. And it's probably what you would expect if you already were familiar with the VeggieTales content. I would describe him as a centrist-leaning right politically. He seems to be very well informed on racial issues, which was kind of cool to see. But when it comes to LGBT issues, he seems pretty close-minded on those kinds of topics. Versus when it comes to, say, what happened recently in the news with the overturn, he seemed to be a reluctant pro-lifer, so it could be worse. Overall, it's not politics that just overall disgust me and make me dislike him as a person. I think it's easy to see that he's a genuine person who cares about people and has a belief system that he's subscribed to his whole life. He's obviously super duper intelligent. He taught himself film and computer graphics. So, like, I don't know. Something else that surprised me about reading this book is that it allowed me to approach some of my Christian deconstructing from a different perspective that finally wasn't just one of animosity, even though Phil Vischer is not a Catholic, but just the way that he discussed how he saw God in his situation and what he took out of it. Needless to say, he is a very humble person. I wasn't expecting to get that takeaway from the book. Somehow Phil Vischer is able to evangelize without you, like, rolling your eyes and being like, I don't know. At least for me, I think he does a good job. Led me to rewatching the Jonah movie that I hadn't seen since I was a child, and now I can't get the music out of my head for days. That's the latest that I'm currently up to. I did skip a couple books because they just weren't notable enough for me to talk about. That's my half of 2022 book reading recommendations. I definitely recommend every book I talked about except American Gods. I guess if you can kind of see there's like a link between the kinds of books that I enjoy, where it's kind of like suspenseful, there's a mystery, there's kind of true crime involved, but there may be like a supernatural element tied in as well. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've read any of these books, tell me your own reviews. Tell me what books you've been reading this year. I'm always open to reading more books. Again, I expect that when I post this will show up in people's feeds and they'll be like, oh yeah, I subscribed to this one random person who made that PP video like a year ago. I don't care about this person's content anymore, and I'm gonna go down from 2,000 subscribers to somewhere in the thousands. I'm already fully aware of that. But once again, I do approach YouTube as just a hobby, so I never tell people to subscribe or like my content because I just want people to be here if they want to be here, you know? So if you do see my content and you do unsubscribe, nothing personal. You should definitely only watch content that you are interested in. And someone will come across my video. There'll be some kind of audience, maybe. We'll see. Not that it matters. With that being said, I hope you're doing okay. I hope I'm doing okay. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.